as the apostles traveled throughout the Roman Empire, they ran into different kinds of people in order to preach the message of the gospel. In Acts 17, they're in Athens in Greece, and so the gospel is going to be adapted in a way that the people can understand it. So I want you to look at Acts 17, verse 31. The apostle had gone through Athens and saw all of these idols in the city. And he found one altar that was stated to an unknown God. So just in case we missed a God that we don't have an altar and idol for, we'll build this altar and put to an unknown God. And they'll cover all of their bases. And make sure we worship all possibilities. Well, the apostle, rather than criticizing them for that, turned it into a gospel opportunity. And he said, I'm going to explain to you this unknown God. Back in verse 24 of Acts 17. God who made the world and everything in it, since He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Now this is a new idea for the Athenians, because they thought God was in those temples. Their gods were in those temples, and so they brought sacrifices and committed all kinds of religious acts and all of that in those temples. Verse 25. Nor is He worshipped with men's hands, as though He needed anything, since He gives to all life, breath, and all things. So when he was, the apostles' view is that God is the one who gives us our very breath. You just breathed. That came from God. We just had a thought. God is sustaining us so that we can think. We feel either hot or cold. God is sustaining your body and the bodily system that you have. He's not worshipped with men's hands, as though He needed anything, since He gives to all life, breath, and all things. Verse 26. He's made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Wait now. This is vague. He has drawn a picture of God with His words. And He says of God, He explains where all the nations came from. They dwell on all the face of the earth, and they come from one blood, every nation, according to verse 26. Now remember, all those nations are gathering together against the Lamb and against His people, to fight against God. Okay? But the apostolic message says, God has made from one blood every nation of men. Wow. I remember meeting a North Korean man and talking, and the group that I was with was talking with him about the one true God. His response was, every nation has their God. That's his thinking. Every nation has their God. From this passage, the apostolic truth is the one God has made from one blood every nation of men, and dwell on the face of the earth. So the nations do not have the privilege of saying who their God is. You see what the apostles were saying? That we are made from the one true God. It's not up to us to decide who our God is. He says, He's determined their pre-appointed times and boundaries of their dwellings. One of the younger nations on earth is the United States of America. We can trace our history easily because of the young age of our country. But yet, God has determined the pre-appointed times and boundaries. When you think of Korea, there's ancient history. Oh, back 5,000 years, right? You said, oh, the division of the nation. Do you think all of this is an accident? Did it happen without God seeing it? Of course not. The apostles would say that He has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. But why has He done this? Why is God like this? Why has God said these things? Why has God acted in this way? He's the true God who created us from one blood. So in a true sense, there's one race of people. We just have different ethnicities, different unique things about us, but from one race, one blood. The apostolic view in chapter 17, verse 27, explains that. And Satan has, through all of history, tried to destroy it. Here's the reason. Here's the reason. So that they should seek the Lord, in the hope that they might grope for Him and find Him. Now you say, well, why are there all of these religions on the earth? Well, it's a sign that there's a true God. It's not that all religions point to God. It's that all religions are evidence that man has in him a groping and a longing for God. He's made a lot of mistakes in how, just like Cain did with his brother Abel. Cain made a mistake in how he was designing his act of worship, even back to the Garden of Eden. Men have throughout history made mistakes related to their religion, forgetting the one true God, failing to acknowledge Him. When Noah got off of the ark, after the earth had been destroyed by the flood, he set up an altar to God, acknowledging the one true God who has sustained them through a worldwide flood. First act, acknowledge Him. Why are nations divided and boundaries set? So that the people that live there might seek the true God. That was the apostolic idea. And find Him. You see, in religion, there's these interesting things, and that is, some people take pride in the fact they're seeking, and they keep seeking, and they keep seeking, and they keep seeking, and I'm seeking, I'm trying to find the truth, and they're still searching, and they're still searching, and so, like almost forever, they're searching for the truth. But the apostolic idea is not only would they grope and seek after God, but they would find Him. They would be able to find Him. Because He's not far from each one of us. He's here. The invisible God is here. He's near. When you open your eyes this morning and you woke from a night's sleep, whether you had a good sleep or not, you awoke, God was in the room. He's not far from each one of us. In Him we live and move and have our being. We exist because of this living God. Now it goes on and on. This is the it's Paul's presentation of the gospel to the Athenians in Acts 17. You can go back and read that. And I wanted to read that because of the connection, because of how the apostles looked at it, and then finally how this nation that had rejected God, this final end-time world nation that rejects God, the kingdom, the empire of the beast, rejects God and has rejected Him. Over and over again, we have seen in our study of the book of Revelation two things. One is that God gives, during the Great Tribulation time, plenty of signs for people to repent. Plenty of signs. There's 144,000 of these Jewish men probably announcing the gospel during that time period. There's plenty of signs. There's so many, it's like a worldwide revival. So many people come to Jesus Christ during that time. Plenty of signs, and yet the majority refuses to repent. Plenty of signs. There's 2 witnesses in Jerusalem that appeared. They're killed and they're left in the streets for the whole world to look at. You know, it's going to be on CNN probably. The whole world will see these 2 witnesses in the street. That's found in, if you want to look, it's Revelation 11. We've covered that. And then they'll get up and they'll be taken to heaven. Wow. Witnesses, signs. There's a great and a mighty angel that will fly through the air announcing the everlasting gospel as everything heads to the end. Like this. Just like in the beginning, there were great miracles. As they get near and near the end, there will be great miracles. But in spite of all kinds of signs, people still refuse to repent of their sins. 4 times in the book of Revelation, it says that they would not repent. Their hearts, the characteristic of the end-time people, characteristic of the people under the authority of the Antichrist, the characteristic of those people who are marked by the beast and controlled by his kingdom, will be hard-hearted, cold, refusing, just like Pharaoh, refusing to repent. But the judgment upon Babylon is certain. It's known as a great city. The judgment was pronounced long before by the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah 21, verse 9. The chapter is titled, The Fall of Babylon. And from the great prophet Isaiah, we get these words. Look, here comes a chariot of men and a pair of horsemen. And he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all the carved images of her gods he has broken to the ground. Oh, my threshing and the grain of my floor, that which I have heard from the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I have declared to you. Here, the prophet proclaimed the fall many years in the future of Babylon. Exactly what is said in John's writing in Revelation 18. In verse 2, he cried mightily with a loud voice, this angel, and said, and I quote the exact words of Isaiah, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison of every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. You know, it reminds me, and I always think of Sodom and Gomorrah over and over again, and the judgment that came upon Sodom and Gomorrah in the story of Abraham and Lot, and how that God rescued Lot and his family from Sodom. The angel actually went into Sodom and took them by the hand to bring them out of the city. And because this was Abraham's nephew, and he is part of the covenant family. And so he was rescued from that great judgment that was to come. As we look at the story, we go further, and it says in verse 4, there was another voice that said, "Come out of her, out of Babylon, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues." There's so many parallels with Sodom and Gomorrah here. And yet this is Sodom and Gomorrah was on a small scale. We're talking about a worldwide scale in Revelation 18. There were so many that had come to believe in God will come to believe in God during the tribulation period. The word says, come out of her, come out of Babylon, commercial Babylon, religious Babylon, come out of her, the mother of all the abominations of the earth. That's how terrible. She's full of demons, controlled by the demonic, and every foul spirit, it says in verse 2. How terrible will Babylon be? But the nations love Babylon because of the commercial activity. Think of it. The great cities of the world. Think of it. We go and we want to buy